Good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of Sgoutas Sports. My name is Oliver Hayes.
And I'm Brennan Mayer. If you don't recognize us, it's probably because it's our first time actually being anchors. And honestly, I'm pretty excited. Oliver, how you feeling?
I'm glad you asked. I'm locked in, and I can't wait to get into it. But first, let's pass it over to our crew to preview the women's basketball team's highly anticipated Sweet 16 matchup versus Player of the Year Caitlin Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes.
What's up, Buff fans? My name is Malaina Humphreys, and I am joined with Harrison Simeon and Troy Finnegan. And the Colorado women's basketball team just landed in Seattle, Washington, and they are going to make their first Sweet 16 appearance in the last 20 years. We just saw two big wins over Middle Tennessee as well as Duke in those first two rounds. Now, can you guys take me through what those first tournament games looked like?
Yeah, the Buffs have been excellent the first two games. They were underdogs in both games, even coming in as the higher seed against Middle Tennessee. They were still an underdog. They came out with a blistering start on offense in that game, knocking down threes from everywhere, really running the Blue Raiders out of the gym right from the start, and then holding up on the defensive end to hold the lead. The game against Duke elite defensively. A much more slower game, much more difficult game for the Buffs, obviously playing on the road in Cameron Indoor Stadium. But as she has done all season, Jalen Sherrod making the plays at the end of the game, and then the Buffs, they hang their hat defensively, and they did that in overtime against the Blue Devils, not allowing a single field goal in the extra period to pick up that win. So yeah, it's been a great start for the Buffs so far.
And for Iowa on the other side, I think they've definitely just been cruising along, defeating Southeast Louisiana in the first round and then Georgia in the second. Caitlin Clark especially, the dominant presence on that team, scoring 31 of the last 33 points for Iowa in that last game. So they've just been going along as a 2 seed, one of the best offensive teams in the country and in a long time in women's college basketball. So it's definitely going to be a challenge the Buffs are going to have to face and really take on.
Now, I do want to go back to the Duke and Colorado game because we were looking at the ESPN bracket challenge, and nearly 80% of the people's bracket voted against Colorado. So can you tell me what really worked for Colorado in that game?
Yeah, they really. I was really impressed by their persistence in that game. They got off to a hot start. They got off to a 15-2 run early. They silenced the Cameron Crazies, which is a tough thing to do in Durham, as we see all the time with Duke. Really well-coached team with Kara Lawson. But Duke battled back in the second half. They really locked in defensively. They put in a press that kind of bothered CU on offense. And Duke took the lead in the fourth quarter, and J.R. Payne cited this in the press conference. They never gave up. They kept fighting. They leaned into each other. And Sherrod picks up a couple big buckets to send the game into overtime, and then they really locked down defensively, not giving the Blue Devils any breathing room. They forced a ton of turnovers and picked up some easy buckets. Frida Foreman hit a tough jumper in overtime. They got the ball inside to Aaronette Vonleh for 2 big buckets that gave them all the breathing room that they needed. So yeah, it was a really, really impressive performance in a hostile environment from CU.
Yeah, and I was really impressed by Quay Miller's performance because she had been, really struggling up until that date. Having games with very few or even 0 points as the Buffs' leading scorer for the season. But I was glad to see her. She had 17 points, 14 rebounds, and looked really like herself again in that game. So hopefully she's able to continue that.
I agree. I think that was a really big game for Clay, especially when we went to the Pac-12 tournament. She was 0 for 16 for that entire tournament. So just seeing her get back to her normal self, I think, was really important. And it's going to be really important looking forward playing Iowa. Now, we did have one of our Sgoutas members attend a practice as Colorado made a stop back home before heading off to Seattle. So we are going to throw it over to Megan McPherson, and she's going to give us an inside look onto what that practice was.
Hey, what's up, Buff fans? I'm Megan McPherson with Sgoutas Sports. I'm outside the CU Event Center right now, where this afternoon we heard from head coach J.R. Payne and several members of the CU women's basketball team ahead of their matchup this Friday in the Sweet 16 against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Head coach J.R. Payne came into the press conference excited and said that their team is ready for Friday despite being the lower seed in this matchup. In that press conference, I asked Coach J.R. Payne about how 4 years ago her team lost to 4-ranked Oregon by 59 points. That was the worst loss in 35 years for CU women's basketball. And so now for her team to make it to the Sweet 16, this is what she had to say.
Yeah, it feels awesome. Funny story about that game, though. So Jalen Sherrod was a freshman that night. It was her first Pac-12 game, and I always tell people we lost by 100, but 59 is probably more accurate. But it's funny because she was interviewed as a freshman point guard on the road, just lost by 59 points. And the reporter asked her, well, what do you think? Like, this is Pac-12. That was tough. And the first words out of her mouth, and this defines Jalen Sherrod, the first words out of her mouth were, they have to come to Boulder. And they came to Boulder and they still kicked our tail. But it's that mindset, and I think that sort of permeates throughout our program of being, respectful of everyone but not fearing anybody. But yeah, we've definitely come a long way from that game and want to just continue to get better and better.
I also talked to guard Jalen Sherrod, who has led Colorado to the Sweet 16 and has led the team this entire season. In high school, Sherrod had an injury that only allowed her to have one Power 5 offer, and that was from Colorado. I asked her about what the lowest moment for her so far has been and what that means to her now that her team is in the Sweet 16.
I think for me, just having to walk away from basketball for the betterment of my health was very hard because as a 19? As a 19-year-old kid, basketball is everything. Like, in the peak of season, we had just came off being the number one team in the country before I went into surgery. So it was just a lot, of just realization that I wouldn't be playing basketball for the rest of the season. So I think that was as low as it was at the time, it was also a maturity level of just saying you got to do what's best for you so you can be better coming out of it. But making it to the Sweet 16, like I said, it just made everything worth it. And like I said, there's more basketball to go, and we'll be really blessed to accomplish more things. But at the time, it was just a lot to go through and walk away from when you felt like, the team was rolling in a great direction.
We also caught some of the team's training session this afternoon. They're getting loose ahead of their flight to Seattle tonight before their matchup on Friday. Members of the Sgoutas sports team will have a full pregame show ahead of that matchup, so stay tuned for more updates. We'll give you the entire game rundown. We'll talk about Iowa, their strengths, their weaknesses, and what Colorado can do to come out and make it to the Elite Eight. Reporting for the CU Event Center, I'm Megan McPherson, Sgoutas Sports.
Thanks, Megan. This is the Buffs' first Sweet 16 appearance since 2003.
Oh, Malaina, that was actually the year I was born. So just about 6 months after the game, this will be the first Sweet 16 appearance by the Buffs I'll see in my lifetime.
That is so exciting. Well, Sgoutas sports fans, please stay tuned because when we come back from the break, we are going to break down the keys of the game. Welcome back, Sgoutas sports fans. So now we want to break it down on the opposing side. Harrison, can you take me through some of the strengths of the Iowa Hawkeyes?
Well, Malaina, they're definitely a very well-rounded offense. They're third in points per game. They can rebound the ball, they can pass the ball, move the ball around the floor. They play very fast. They're 10th in the NCAA in pace, and it's going to be a very, very difficult offense because they can do so many different things well.
Yeah, they shoot the basketball really well, and they move the ball really well, which is a really difficult combination to defend, obviously, and that's how they have the best offense in women's college basketball. Everyone knows about Caitlin Clark's ability to shoot the ball from the outside, but she is such a good passer. She finds her shooters. She finds Gabby Marshall. She's a 38% three-point shooter. She's above 50% this postseason. She gets it out to McKenna Warnock. She's a 39% three-point shooter. And Kate Martin is another 38% three-point shooter, so a lot of diverse weapons that this offense can go to. Shooting the ball, they get the ball inside to Monica Cesano. She's third in the NCAA in field goal percentage, 67%. Really good finisher at the rim, really good at getting herself open inside. So very diverse scoring attack, obviously spearheaded by Clark, but there's a lot of weapons on this offense that can really hurt you.
All right, well, the Iowa Hawkeyes are number 2 seeded in this NCAA tournament, and they've also were number 3 AP ranked. So they're going to be a very tough opponent, especially with everything that you guys just broke down. So can you guys take me through what some of the weaknesses are going to be for Iowa?
Yeah, defensively, they're pretty average, and part of that comes back to their pace. It's a possession game. Obviously, more possessions, you're going to give up more points, but there are some holes to exploit defensively. Gabby Marshall's a really good defender. But other than that, on the perimeter, there should be some driving lanes open for CU's guards. We know how good Jalen Sherrod is at getting to the rim. They gave up a ton of mid-range jumpers against Georgia. Georgia really hurt them in that intermediate area. Quay Miller, that's her shot. She found the stroke again against Duke. That's something that she could exploit, especially she'll be going against a lot of smaller matchups. She'll be able to shoot over some of those smaller defenders. Iowa likes to play 4 guards. One of them will have to guard Quay, so that shot will be there. But yeah, so definitely defensively, I think that there are some places that CU will be able to keep up because, they're going to have to score points to win this game.
Yeah, and I do think they are a very Caitlin Clark reliant team. I mean, she's a transcendent talent, but she does score or assist on over 50% of their made baskets. So if she can be taken out of the game, then I think that will definitely open things up for CU's offense and defense to maybe exploit things if she's having an off night.
Yeah, well, even just touching on that in this last matchup against Georgia, she scored or helped assist on 31 of the last 33 points that they made in that game. Now, it's going to be looking forward to the Buffs. What are the Buffs going to need to do to be able to succeed against Iowa?
My biggest key for the Buffs in this game is ball pressure, and that's something that CU loves to do. We know that Jalen Sherrod and Kendall Wetta love to get up into ball handlers. They love to pick up full court, 3/4 court, and they're going to need to. The rule is pick up half court at the latest against Caitlin Clark. As soon as she crosses half court, she is a threat to pull up from anywhere. She'll shoot from the logo. She's got the step back in the bag. She is such a lethal threat out to 30, 35, 40 feet, like a Steph Curry kind of shooter. So you cannot let her, especially in transition, walk into those threes. You got to pick up early. You got to make it hard for her. You've got to fluster her a little bit. See if you can get her out of rhythm, because if she's out of rhythm, then that Iowa offense is out of rhythm.
Yeah, and I do think kind of touching on that is to slow the game down, kind of keep things in the half court, because our team is a very half court heavy team, runs a lot of sets. So I think definitely some crashing the glass, making the game more physical, not really allowing Iowa to run in transition, to they like to play fast, 10th in the NCAA in pace. So I think slowing the game down, keeping things in front of them is definitely the way to win for the CU Buffs.
We talked a lot about Quay Miller and how she's just been a really important player for the Buffs, but who do you think the Buffs are going to be heavily reliant on?
My X factor in this game for CU is Tayana Jones. She's been kind of quiet the last couple weeks, except the first quarter against Duke or against Middle Tennessee. She did knock down 2 threes, but they're going to really need her on the defensive end in this game. She's 6'3", she's big, she's super athletic. Big wings who are athletic are great defensively, especially against a bigger guard like Clark. Clark is 6 feet. We know Jalen Sherrod's only about 5'7". Kendall Wetta's on the smaller side too, so obviously those two, being the great defenders that they are, will get some of that Clark assignment. But if she starts to get going, then they're going to need to put some length on her, to put some size on her. I think that Tayana Jones, she's great at being disruptive with her hands, getting her hands in passing lanes, getting into the dribble. So I think that she can be a really disruptive option, kind of as a change-up for J.R. Payne and Toriano Towns to go to as a defender on Clark. And I think that if Clark starts to get rolling, that Tayana Jones could get some minutes on her. So I think that could be a key for CU in this game.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Frida Foreman for the Buffs. I think she definitely is the best shooter on the squad. So generating open looks for her to match, Iowa's shooting attack, which will involve a lot of threes, kind of responding in that kind of way on the offensive side will definitely be important. She's going to be heavily pressured on the defensive end as well. For her to lock in on some of those secondary Iowa players is going to be crucial for the Buffs to have a chance. And I think those 3-pointers are going to be necessary against such a high-scoring offense like Iowa.
And we've touched on Caitlin Clark a lot, and I too want to kind of go over some stats. She has an average of 26 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, and 8 assists per game. Now, you did talk about Tayana Jones having to kind of cover her. Who else do you think could be really important when it comes to Caitlin Clark?
Well, they use her in a lot of different ways. She's not just a lot of these big shot creators are primarily on-ball creators, and she is that. She's very good at it. But they use her off the ball also. They run her off a lot of screens, trying to get her open looks off the ball. She's a great cutter, and she uses that to get the ball inside, especially when teams are trapping her off the dribble. She uses her. They get it to her off the ball to get her the ball in the paint, in the mid-range, where she can pass, she can shoot. She can finish with the floater. But I really want to focus on her in ball screens. It's kind of pick your poison. They could double. They could switch. Aaronette Vonleh, who I assume Iowa will target a lot in these screens, has been mostly a drop coverage player, meaning she sits back in the paint when her man goes to set a screen. I don't think that you're going to be able to do that against Iowa, against Caitlin Clark, though, because she's so good at getting into the pull-up. She's so good at getting into the floater. So I'm really interested to see how J.R. Payne comes up with a game plan to really neutralize her in those situations. What do you do? Do you blitz? Do you send doubles from elsewhere? So that's something that I'm really going to be looking for in the chess match between the two coaches.
Yeah, and I think defending a player like Clark is very, very difficult because as good as she is as a shooter, she can pull up from near half court. Passing may be her best skill, and I think it will be on a player like Aaronette Vonleh, a player like Quay Miller, to guard those entry passes. She's very, very good at to kind of disrupt things. And they're a somewhat middle-of-the-pack team in terms of turnovers. So if CU can force more than their average number of turnovers, I think that will definitely slow the game down in a way, maybe get CU out in transition and prevent Iowa from getting their offense in the good flow of things. So defending entry passes, which Clark is extremely good at, will be on Vonleh and the entire CU defense in order to stop Clark.
Looks like Colorado's got their work cut out for him. The Hawkeyes and the Buffs are going to face off at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Stay tuned after the break to get the rest of the Colorado athletics updates.
Let's go, Buffs!
Thank you.
With the big matchup coming up tonight, our Buffs are looking to make the Elite Eight.
That actually reminds me of our trivia question. When was the last time our women's team made the Elite Eight? Hint, it's not 1963, the last time the men's team were in basketball's Final Eight. We'll have that answer for you later on in the show.
Wow, what an exciting time to be a Buffs fan. Brennan, one more thing before we move on. What is your prediction for tonight's battle?
I can't tell you how excited I am. Give me the Buffs by 1,000,000. While the women continue to dance, the men will play normal ball. This year, they were knocked out of the second round of the NIT last Sunday against Utah Valley, losing by a score of 81-69. Alex Roberts was there. Here's what he saw from the Buffaloes in their last hurrah.
What's up, everyone? This is Alex Roberts reporting for Shapiro Sports. After the Buffs dropped their second-round NIT matchup to the Utah Valley Wolverines, 81-69 was the final score. And for Utah Valley, the story was Trey Woodbury, who put up 25 points and went 11 for 15 from the field and just was running circles around the Buffs defense. Buffs defense struggled mightily, but one of the bright spots for this Buffs team was Lawson Lovering, who scored 21 points, a career high. So a great end of the year for Lawson. Looking forward, Ethan Wright will not be with the team next year. He put up 17 in his final game with the Buffs. A great final performance for the Ivy League transfer. Looking forward to next season. The hopes are high. With Cody Williams coming in and plenty of other recruits and freshmen potentially getting their spots on the roster. It's looking to be a bright season next year for the Buffs. That's all that is for this season. I've been Alex Roberts for Shapiro Sports here at the CU Event Center.
Thanks, Alex. After an interesting season from the men, their 2022-2023 season comes to an end. Zoe Paulson is here to give us a full recap of the year and give us a glimpse into what lies ahead.
Hey Buffs fans, I am Zoe Paulson and this is Buff Banner. Now, the Buffs men's basketball team currently just played a season. It ended at home in the NIT against an unranked opponent. The ending is far from how Tad Boyle and the Buffs hoped it would go. Way back in the fall, Boyle's bunch had their hearts set on an NCAA tournament run. Boyle said at the time that the team was, quote, resilient and tough, and he was excited to see how the leadership roles were doled out into the team, which had just lost huge leaders in Evan Batty and McKinley Wright. Despite this, the Buffaloes started out with a bang. Early on, Colorado defeated 11th-ranked Tennessee on the road. The Volunteers defeated the reigning champion Jayhawks just a couple weeks after CU's stunner. Tennessee went on to snag a 4th seed in the tournament, while the Black and Gold didn't get close to making the cut. But the Buffs dug their own grave. losing games that should have been automatic wins. Just like days before that win against the Vols, dropping to Grambling. The Buffs also lost to UMass. This odd dynamic of winning games they shouldn't and losing games they should win continued for a while. And as the season went along, stars like Tristan Da Silva and KJ Simpson got a chance to shine. Both Da Silva and Simpson made all Pac-12 teams at the end of the year. We did get a chance to watch some of the players improve over the course of the year, but it wasn't enough to keep up with the rest of the pack. When the curtain closed, Colorado was 18-17. 13 of those losses came from Pac-12 opponents. As the season closes, we have already seen several Buffs enter the transfer portal. Lawson Lovering started exploring his options almost immediately after that last loss. However, Boyle and his Buffaloes have a lot to look forward to still. The number 1 prospect in the country, Cody Williams, heads here to Boulder next season. Hopefully he can be the boost that Colorado needs to make that tournament run. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hydrate and recycle, and here's the desk with more portal news.
Thanks, Zoe. Following the men's basketball team's second-round defeat in the NIT, center Lawson Lovering, along with forwards Neat Clifford and Quincy Allen, entered their names into the transfer portal. Lovering averaged 5 points and 5 rebounds this past year, and the Buffs had a career high 21 points in the season-ending loss to Utah Valley. Clifford started all 35 games for the Buffs this season, averaging 6 points and 4 rebounds. Allen played in just 11 games this season for CU, logging more than 5 minutes an appearance just once. The now former Buffs will look elsewhere to continue their college careers.
The women's lacrosse team had a slow start to the season when they lost their first 4 games, but have picked it up since then, winning their last 3. They won Sunday, beating California 20-3. The girls look to continue their hot streak this weekend as they travel to play USC on Friday and Arizona State on Sunday.
The tennis team traveled to Oregon over the weekend. The Ducks, who are ranked 47th in the country, swept the Buffs 4-0. The Buffs now have a record of 8-6 on the season and are 0-3 in conference play. The team is looking to bounce back from their loss on Monday, where they take on Northern Arizona on the road. We will head to break, but before, you better be prepared as Alan Vighetti will bring us into this week's Rapid Fire.
Who's the biggest Buff fan here?
Me! That guy.
School Buff! Go Buffs, baby! We're all about the Buffs!
School Buffs!
They can't contain us. We're the best. We can't be stopped.
Go Buffs! Go Buffs! Go Buffs!
Hey Buffs fans, I'm Alan Vighetti bringing you this week's Rapid Fire. Let's get rapid. Tonight, the women's basketball team takes on Iowa at 5:30, right after our show. Tune into that Sweet 16 matchup, CU's first in 20 years. This weekend, women's golf team heads to the Ping Invitational at ASU. The Invitational kicked off today, but will run throughout the entire weekend. The women's lacrosse team joins them at ASU on Sunday for their head-to-head at 1 p.m. Next week, the men's golf team travels to Eugene for the Oregon Duck Invitational. That event kicks off Monday and wraps up Tuesday. Plenty of action for the Buffs fans to tune into over the next week. Let's hope we can get some more madness with a women's basketball win tonight. I'm Alan Vighetti, and this has been Rapid Fire. Back to you guys at the desk.
Spring football is officially underway as the Buffs started practice this past Sunday. Here's what Cowboy Dion had to say about what he's building.
Right now, we're a team, and we're building team. I want more than that. I want it to be more than a team. I want to be something to behold. It's something you got to prepare for. Really sit down and prepare for. I don't want just a football team. Yeah.
Dion also cites frustration with the timing of spring break, saying that when you love something, you don't want to break from it. Life is eat, sleep, football for Deion Sanders. And don't forget Colorado's spring game is now only a month away. Make sure to show up or tune in on April 22nd, Buffs fans.
The track and field team had their first outdoor meet last weekend in Oregon. The Buffs started this portion of their season strong. Matt Ward finished in first place in the discus, and Allie Rutledge secured the win in the high jump. They'll look to continue their success at the Spank Blazing Invitational today and tomorrow. We wish the team good luck as they travel down to CSU Pueblo to compete in the Invitational.
The first pitch of the club baseball season will be thrown this weekend with a 3-game series against Wyoming. The games will take place at Scott Carpenter Park on Friday at 7 p.m., followed by a doubleheader on Saturday at 2 and 4 p.m. If you can't make it to the Diamond, don't worry. You can catch select games right here on the Skill Sports YouTube channel.
Now for the answer to this week's trivia question. We asked you guys, when was the last time the women's basketball team made the Elite Eight? Drum roll, please. And the answer is, after finishing the regular season 21-3, the Buffs knocked off Southern University, LSU, and Stanford before losing to Oklahoma 94-60 in the Elite Eight. Tonight, Colorado hopes to end the 21-year drought.
Our tweet of the week comes from, surprise, the CU women's basketball team. After their overtime thriller against number 3 seed Duke, they got to celebrating. March isn't just about dances, it's about showers too. Let's take a look. Brennan, how did you celebrate the Buffaloes win?
Gritty. Hit a little gritty.
Oh, that sounds interesting. You want to know what I said after that?
What was that?
It's a parade inside my city, yeah! Shout out to the Memphis Grizzlies.
Well, let me ask you this. After a win, are you a shower or bath guy?
You know, I like a little bubbles in my bath, so that's all we have this week. Thanks for joining us on another edition of Skill Sports. My name is Oliver Hayes.
And I'm Brennan Mayer. Remember, tip-off is just in a couple hours. Before you catch that, remember you heard it here first.